Welcome to Proven in the Plant, real-life Jameson Cell success stories. Your presenter today is Carter Lawrence, Solutions Metallurgist at Glencore Technology. Some quick housekeeping. You're on mute to keep the session focused. Please use the Q&A icon for questions. No need to raise your hand. Feel free to ask questions anytime and we will address them as we go. After the formal program, we'll stay on to answer any remaining questions in the chat. Let's begin.
Thank you. Okay, so today's webinar is going to be called Proven in the Plant, Real-Life Jameson Cell Success Stories. So today we're really just going to focus on those 4 real-world case studies. So we'll have a short introduction, dive into the 4 case studies, a very short wrap-up at the end, and that's it. So just a brief introduction on the Jameson Cell. So the Jameson Cell has been installed 500 times globally, has had over 35 years in operation, has gone through 5 generations of learning and perfecting. It produces very fine bubbles below 0.5 millimeters, and it's very highly effective in fine and coarse particle flotation. It's fast and self-stabilizing. Large carrying capacity per unit, meaning you need less units to perform the same duty, which you'll see in some of the case studies today. It's self-aspirating and there's no blowers required. It has a lot of flexibility in duty, which again you'll see today, anywhere from high grade to high recovery duties. And it has froth washing to reduce entrainment. And it does have a tailings recycle system, which makes it essentially stable regardless of what's happening upstream. Okay, so now we're going to dive into the case studies. So our first case study is from North America. So it's Northern Star Resources Pogo. So Northern Star Pogo is a gold mine in the Tintina Gold Province in Alaska. And in 2019, they installed one of our E32348 Jameson cells in a rougher scalper duty. So the reason for the Jameson Cell installation is site was planning to significantly increase their throughput, and the flotation circuit was identified as a critical bottleneck. Now they actually required a 50% plus increase in flotation throughput needed, but they had very limited footprint to expand that existing circuit. So they essentially needed something to debottleneck the circuit without taking up much space. And so the Jameson Cell was identified as a potential solution in a rougher scalper duty. So, firstly, Pogo looked at our bench scale dilution test work, which can be done in any lab around the world very inexpensively. So they looked at dilution test work on the bench scale, and they found that the Jameson Cell was viable. Because Glencore Technology offers process guarantees from that work, they chose not to bother with piloting and went straight through to full-scale installation. So the cell was commissioned in November of 2020, and very quickly the Jameson Cell hit target performance. So you can see on the graph on the right, the orange bar there is the bench scale testing, and the blue dots are plant data. Now, very quickly, the bench scale tests were matched or exceeded on most results, with an average result of 91% gold recovery at 47 grams per ton of gold, and that's from the flotation feed in the rougher circuit. Now, since bringing the Jameson Cell online, the flotation feed tons have steadily increased. So the circuit is now processing around 5,500 tons per day, which is a 60% plus increase from prior to Jameson Cell installation. And this is largely enabled by the Jameson Cell removing 90% of the floatable gold at the head of the circuit. Now, in that time, circuit mass pull has also steadily decreased. Now that's again enabled by the Jameson Cell, producing a very high grade concentrate at a high recovery. And this was also critical to success of the project because downstream of the flotation circuit, there was volumetric capacity constraints. So despite increasing the feed tons, they did not have a lot of volumetric capacity for the mass pull. Now, despite this massive increase in throughput, as well as the reduction in mass pull, The circuit flotation recovery has remained stable since the implementation of the Jameson Cell technology. So, summing up case study number 1, Northern Star Pogo required to debottleneck their flotation circuit with very limited footprint availability. So a single Jameson cell, which is pictured on the right there, was installed as a rougher scalper in 2020, receiving the flotation feed. The average Jameson cell performance since then has been 40 grams per ton of gold at 91% plus recovery. Since commissioning, the flotation feed tons have increased by 60%, so from below 3,000 tons per day to above 5,500 tons per day. The circuit mass pull has also been reduced, which is driven by the high Jameson cell concentrate grade, which is from the wash water system on the Jameson cell. And despite this increase in throughput and reduction in mass pull, the circuit recovery has remained steady. So at Northern Star Pogo, the Jameson Cell project has been considered a massive success, and it has enabled that massive production increase with minimal plant modifications. So we'll now move on to the second case study. Now this is in South America, in Brazil, in a underground copper mine. So this is Ero Copper Caraiba. Now Ero Copper Caraiba installed one of our B6500 24 downcomer Jameson cells in a rougher scalper duty in 2023. So similar to Pogo, throughput was being increased at Caraiba from 400 to 600 tons per hour, and that was to compensate for a lower feed grade as the mine deepened. And that is a very common issue in mining now with declining feed grades. So initially, lab scale dilution test work was completed to determine the viability of the Jameson cell, and then they chose to also do pilot work to confirm that. After that work was completed, the Jameson cell was selected, and it was considered the most important part of the debottlenecking project. So bench scale test work, so our 3-stage dilution test, was completed to determine whether the Jameson cell could achieve a high enough upgrade ratio to produce final concentrate from rougher feed. The bench scale results were very positive and indicated that the final concentrate, which is a minimum of 34.5% copper, could be achieved at approximately 70% recovery, pointing to the viability of the Jameson cell in this debottlenecking project. So after pilot work was completed, which again confirmed the viability of the Jameson cell, the cell was commissioned in 2024. And the full-scale cell very quickly matched or exceeded the pilot and bench scale test results. So you can see on the graph here, the yellow bar is the Jameson dilution test. The blue dots are the L500 pilot scale tests. And the green dots are post-commissioning on the full-scale Jameson cell. So very quickly, we were achieving 75 to 80% recovery at that target final concentrate grade of 34.5% from that single Jameson cell. And that basically completed the debottlenecking project for Caraiba. We'll now move on to our third case study. This is also in South America, but instead in Peru, Marcobre Mina Justa. Mina Justa installed an E4232/10 downcomer cell in a cleaner scalper duty in 2021. Now it's a copper concentrator. Now differing from the last two case studies, this was a greenfield project, and the Jameson cell was actually installed during the initial construction phase as part of the original flow sheet. Now the Jameson cell at Mina Justa is a cleaner scalper, so it's receiving rougher concentrate and producing a final concentrate from that rougher concentrate. A unique fact about Mina Justa is that it uses seawater for its processing at a natural pH, which is a little bit different than standard. And this was a little bit of a challenge for them to see if the Jameson cell would still perform as they thought it would. Now, after initial commissioning, the Jameson cell was being fed with approximately 18.5% feed grade, and it was producing above 80% recovery at 50.5% copper. Exceeding the design case of 40% quite significantly. Now, because of some operational changes and optimizations, the feed grade to the Jameson cell reduced from 18.5% to 12.5% copper. Now, despite this quite significant decrease, The concentrate grade of 49% was maintained, and recovery did drop a little bit, but only to about 74% despite that huge decrease in feed grade. Now, Marcobre were willing to share some size by recovery data for this, so a little bit more of a deep dive on this case study. Now, the majority of the copper minerals were present in the sub 45 micron fraction, quite common in cleaning duties. However, the entrainment in this fraction was very high, and so you can see there was an average grade at this fraction of 7.45% copper. Now, despite this high entrainment, the Jameson cell was able to upgrade to a grade of 52.9% at 68% recovery, and that's all due to the Jameson cell's froth washing capabilities, basically washing out all of that entrainment. Now, a little bit more of a deep dive in this size by recovery. So you can see from the 106 to 45 micron range, recoveries were 64 to 74%. 150 micron to 106, the recoveries were 47%. And for plus 150 micron, they were 28%. And this was largely, this decrease was largely due to liberation. Now, all of these size by recoveries were as expected. They were hitting what Marcobre Minajusta was expecting. And so these results show the Jameson cell is effective on ultrafine particles, but not limited to ultrafine particles. It does also recover the floatable coarse particles too. Now, an interesting addition for Minajusta was, you can see on the red bars on the graph, the recoveries for native copper were very high, even in the plus 150 micron range. Now, in conventional flotation technology, so a standard tank cell, it's generally considered very difficult to recover native copper, especially in coarser sizes. So this was a somewhat unexpected surprise. And was very welcome, of course. Now, this shows some microscope images of the Jameson cell concentrate at Minajusta. So you can actually see under the microscope that there is free native copper in the concentrate, again proving these results that the free copper or the native copper was floating in the Jameson cell. So a summary of the Minajusta case. So the Minajusta plant was successfully commissioned and ramped up in under 4 months, and that was assisted with the Jameson cell being very easy to ramp up and commission. Now, the plant was initially fed with a high oxide content, low feed grade, and the Jameson cell greatly exceeded the expectations because it was recovering both the copper oxides and the native copper. Now, due to the operational changes, as mentioned, the feed grade to the Jameson cell reduced quite significantly after 3 months. Despite these lower feed grades, the Jameson cell still delivered high grades at high recovery above the design case. The Jameson cell has demonstrated ability to recover the secondary sulfides, copper oxides, and native copper, and these are all considered very, very difficult to recover in most flotation systems. So, moving on to our final case, and that is Hudbay, New Britannia. Now, this one is a Jameson concentrator, meaning that all the flotation is done only through Jameson cells. So in 2021, Hudbay installed 3 E1732/4 Jameson cells in a rougher scavenger duty, and 1 times Z1201 in a cleaner duty. Now this plant is a copper gold concentrator located in northern Manitoba in Canada. So you can see the flow sheet on the right here. All of the flotation is occurring only through Jameson cells. There was originally 2 DFRs there for like a pre-flotation. Those have since been removed from operation, so it is only Jameson cells. Now, 4 Jameson cells replaced a potential 12 tank cells. And that cut the footprint by about 50%, as well as the power by about 50%, because you don't have any agitation requirements. And there's also no blowers or compressors required. Now, what was very impressive about New Britannia is that the concentrator was water commissioned within 2 days. Now, anyone familiar with commissioning a concentrator, it's often a very slow process, can be quite difficult. So to have it fully water commissioned within 2 days was very impressive, and the Hud Bay team were very impressed by this. Now, within 24 hours of slurry commissioning, the tailings grade target was being achieved in the plant. So again, very fast ramp up and minimal optimization required. Now on the right, you can see the pilot performance with the black dots and the black line against the burgundy squares, which is the plant performance. And you can see that in most cases, the plant performance has quite significantly exceeded the pilot performance. Now, these are some McNulty curves. So essentially, they are benchmarks for what would be considered, I guess, a good ramp-up time for commissioning. And you can see on the red circles for the Jameson Cell and the Jameson concentrator that for both tonnage and gold and copper production, the ramp-up was extremely quick and basically better than most of the predicted McNulty curves. So the New Britannia concentrator, so this was Glencore Technology's first Jameson concentrator, and basically it has been a resounding success. The water and slurry commissioning exceeded benchmark timelines, very fast ramp up, and the plant performance has been exceeding pilot performance and design performance parameters. So moving into our wrap up, the Jameson Cell has been installed more than 500 times since coming to the market in the late 1980s. It's been installed in a wide variety of commodities across many different countries and regions. Now, today's presentation was to highlight 4 success stories. And the aim of these 4 cases was to show how the Jameson Cell can be deployed into roughing duties, cleaning duties, or even both in the case of Jameson concentrator. And it's also not a niche technology. It doesn't have only one use case. It can be deployed into many duties, whether you have a brownfields or greenfields operation. Thank you very much for your attention today, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Carter, and thank you all for joining today. That concludes the presentation, but we'll stay online to answer your questions in the chat. The slides and recording will be available in the webinar lobby, accessible via the same link that you used to join. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to seeing you at the next Glencore Technology webinar.